This is your boy, Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and we're going to be kicking things off today with a game from 1996, the Geneva Grand Prix PCA event. And with the white pieces, we've got Viswanathan and Anand, our current world champion, versus, one of the best players ever, Garry Kasparov, with the black pieces. And so we're going to be kicking things off today. Anand comes out swinging with e4. And what does Kasparov play? We're going into an open Sicilian here with d4, knight takes d4. And here with a6, Kasparov signals that he wants to play his patented Najdorf defense. And so Anand plays bishop e3. And this is leading to normally the English attack with f3, although you can transpose to a couple different lines, the Opusensky with bishop e2, for example. Maybe even Fischer-Sozin with bishop c4, although I'm not so crazy about that. But normally f3 is going to be followed next. And so here, Kasparov plays an anti-English line that he really developed back in the 90s. This game was in 96. Kasparov was really playing this line a lot. This knight g4, and basically it just, says to the bishop, what are you going to do, guy? A lot of people actually with white will play bishop c1, and black just goes back. And sometimes you'll see some grandmaster draws like this. But Anand, and this was a 25-minute match. It's kind of the mini-match, rapid knockout format that the PCA was using in this Grand Prix event. And Anand's got white, right? You're playing a mini-match, especially you got to try to win with white. And so he plays bishop g5. Kasparov plays h6. And after g5 and bishop g3, this is kind of the starting point for this line. And so black usually plays bishop g7. White has a lot of options. He can play h3, f3, queen d2 here. Anand goes with kind of the more positionally sound line where he develops a piece, puts the question to the bishop, or to the knight here, rather, on g4. And, knight e5 is certainly possible, but Kasparov plays h5. I think this is still the main line today. And so h5, the idea is to support the knight and also threaten h4 soon. And so this anti-English line with the knight g4, I played it a couple times myself. It is very interesting, really highly dynamic positions in the middle game. And, it's very different. It's very complicated. And I really like black's positioning. It looks like black's game is completely ridiculous. But the big benefit for black is that he's got this e5 square for his knight. And that is a very important square, and he's locked that down nicely with the pawn here on g5. So we'll continue. Anand captures the knight, and I think to stop it from going to e5, really. And so now Kasparov goes with bishop takes. Also possible to play pawn takes. Personally, I like bishop takes a little more, though. I think it flows better to not let these pawns get doubled here. And so f3, certainly logical, and now bishop back to d7. In some lines of this anti-English, you will see the bishop go to e6, but I think after having played h5, it just, maybe this is a little bit too loose here with these pawns, possibly an immediate h4. It just feels you're trying too hard. The pawns are too loose. So Kasparov goes bishop back to d7. White just, kind of sidesteps. He tries to take the sting out of a pawn advance by black. And knight c6, so just calm development here. Let me see queen d2, and Kasparov plays knight e5, and this is not so calm. Actually, this is pretty aggressive. So what's the deal with knight e5? The knight is extremely well placed. White can't really kick it out with f4 right now. And it's also threatening to hit the c4 square, where the knight on c4 is an absolute monster. Well, white's critical response would have to be queen takes g5, and this actually loses the queen on the spot. So knight e5 was a pretty nice, very sharp move. And if queen takes g5 here, we have simply bishop h6. And now the queen only has, I guess it's got 3 squares. You can go to h4, g3, or take the pawn on h5. Well, let's make it easy. If he takes on h5, we play check, discover attack on the queen. That's a queen for a piece. It's a pretty good deal. If queen to g3, we're simply going to play h4. The queen is trapped, and we have the same check as in the previous example. And if queen h4, just knight to g6. And just it's the same story. There's absolutely no way out for white's queen. I mean, it's completely trapped. So that's a nice move. Knight 95. It certainly seems to work. White can't touch the pawn, and black is playing very quickly with his pieces in the center and everything, really upping the pressure against white early on. So white decides to castle kingside, and this was probably a good call, though he is kind of castling into an attack. The thing about castling queenside is that this knight c4 move is just so strong. The knight is just devastating there with the half-open c-file. Black's queen will surely go to a5 soon. The bishop pointing at his king. This looks like the opening has gone pretty well. So going queenside, that's a mess. Going kingside, you're still castling into the pawns. But, the thing is, if black doesn't get a really good position, or at least, if he doesn't get a good position out of the opening, if he's unable to maintain the initiative and maintain his attack, he's going to be in some trouble strategically. Long term, he's got some holes. These pawns can become big weaknesses long term, and also not to mention white's knights are pretty well placed in the center. So here, Kasparov plays e6. So he takes care of the problem with the knights. The knights no longer have f5 and d5. Also, the queen is now defending g5. But pushing this pawn to e6 here, it does have a major drawback that it weakens the d6 pawn forever. And so this pawn is going to be very weak. However, if Kasparov is able to play energetically enough here, he's going to be okay. He'll have compensation for the weakness of the d6 pawn. And so Anand starts out with b3. He doesn't want to mess with knight to c4, and I think that's pretty understandable. And so Kasparov now with knight to g6. Basically just kind of taking real firm control over f4 and also opening the bishop up along this diagonal. And so rook to d1, eyeing some pressure. I think rook fd1 didn't make quite as much sense because this bishop is just hitting that rook, in long term or whatnot. So I think this makes sense to put the rook on the d and maybe the e file later. And so now Kasparov starts spicing things up. There was no surprise there. He wants to open lines against black's king, or against white's king, rather. And here, white could maybe try to win the d6 pawn. Let's say with knight to e2. This is a really sketchy move, though. And allowing Kasparov, nonetheless, allowing your opponent to open up this h-file and this attack here, it's not even that clear you're even going to be able to take d6. Black can actually, similar to tactics in the game, rook to c8. And the problem is white can't take d6 because he loses a piece. And he loses a piece, flat out. So it's pretty tough. I mean, it's like, where do how do you defend this pressure on the c-file so you can take the pawn on d6? It's very difficult. It's not an easy question to answer. Maybe bishop to d4. I mean, maybe that could work, but I'm really not that convinced. Maybe just e5. It's kind of an ugly move to make, but would open some lines. Hey, just kind of on a conceptual basis, I think if black can maintain counterplay against white,